I was engaged to come over to Milano. I received a letter from Sylvia regarding Zeta Services. And she described the company and the philosophy of the company. And my reaction upon reading the letter, and I sent her a follow-up email, I said, I want to work here. I want to work here. And the reason I said that is because the concept of Zeta Services and the concepts that I'm going to share with you this afternoon are very similar. And they touch upon a passion of mine. The way we think, the way we deal with change, specifically with change, and how we think about it and how we act. And so I began to think about, how can I talk to people? How can I share this with people in a different fashion? Well, I have a great uncle. He is literally my father's uncle, and he was a magician. And so when I was very little, I grew up in the world of magic. And though I am not a professional magician, I like to use, when I speak to people like yourselves, I like to use the magic as a metaphor, a magic moment, a magic moment. And magic moments, I believe, are really the things that you want to achieve in business. Because what you need to do in business today, it moves so fast, it's moving so quick. The technology is changing. The economy is shifting. The personnel, the people that work in the companies, or the ages, the generations, the new generations that are coming up are thinking totally differently. Everybody is moving so rapidly. So what is happening is that it's getting harder and harder to engage people. It's getting harder and harder to get people to listen. It's getting harder and harder to get people to follow. And it's getting harder and harder for people to think differently. But how do you create magic moments? How are they achieved? Well, they are achieved, I believe, by positive thinking. I like to call it thinking differently, to be able to think differently. And when I tell people about thinking differently, they react and they say, Andy, that's great, but you know what? I have very little time to think. It's around the power of the assumption. And that word assumption has a different, spelled differently in every culture, but it basically has the same definition. And the assumption is when you treat something as a truth rather than a belief. And I think what happens is that every day we make assumptions hundreds of times a day. Hundreds of times a day. It can be as simple as you look outside and the sun is clear, the sun is out, the sky is clear, and you make the assumption, I don't need an umbrella today, and you go to work, and as you come out of work, it is pouring rain, and you don't have your umbrella. And the key is to be able to understand how does assumptions affect our thinking. So let me just explain. The assumption here, as we illustrate here, is treating something as a truth rather than a belief. It is made subconsciously. You're not even aware that you're making it. And you take it for granted. You take the assumption for granted. It drives your decisions. And so what I want to share with you is to understand the power of the assumption and how to use it to your benefit. And I call that the assumpte. ASSUMPT with an exclamation mark. And if you're trying to look up that word, don't bother, because I made it up. I coined the phrase the assumpte. The assumpte is when you take your assumptions and move it to the conscious level. When you take it and you move it to the conscious level, and when it's at the conscious level, it then gives you an incredible power. Because when you take it from the subconscious to the conscious, you turn an assumption into an assumpte, and then you have a choice. You can accept it as it is, just like you would an assumption. Or you can reflect on it, and you can begin to think about it, and you can begin to suspend your own belief, which allows new ideas and positive thinking to arise. And then I believe the fastest way to think differently is to be able to challenge your assumptions. You take an assumption, and then you challenge it, and all of a sudden, new ideas are beginning to generate. So how do you know that you're making an assumption? Or assumptions? Well, there's lots of different reasons here. I've listed some. This is something you hear quite often. It's impossible. It can't be done. And it doesn't always have to be in those words, but you know the emotion and the feeling behind it. And then there's not enough, fill in the blank. Not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough resources. You know, you can always find a reason why something cannot work. And it's usually why something isn't working, or the solution to it is not about just the money or just the time or just the people. We tried it last year and it didn't work. Well, last year is very different from this year. The client will never buy it. The customer will never buy it. If you read Steve Jobs' biography, you discover that he created products that people didn't even know they needed. They didn't understand, they didn't express the need, and yet he anticipated it. So sometimes it's not that the client will never buy it or the customer will never buy it. They may not even be thinking about it. But that's when positive thinking, that's when thinking differently comes in. And then last time, as another example, is somebody's already thought of it. So these are all examples of to know when you're making an assumption and to bring it to the conscious level and turn it into the assumptions. So this is a new trick I've been working on. And what I'd like to do is to make this Coke bottle disappear. I'm going to make this Coke bottle disappear. Watch. Look at that. See, you're speechless. I'll do it again. I'll show you again. I take the Coke bottle and I make it disappear. Now I know what you're doing. You are making an assumption. You are making the assumption that I am holding the Coke bottle, that I am, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. So now turn that assumption into an assumption and say, well, maybe he wasn't holding the Coke bottle. Maybe he's using a special bag. Maybe he's using a special bottle. Maybe he's doing an amazing form of misdirection. Or maybe he hypnotized all of us at the same time. You see, when you begin to take your assumptions from the subconscious level, and you take them and you put it to the conscious level, and you give yourself the freedom to be able to think differently, well, that's when the magic moments really happen. Thank you very much for your time. God.